Hello, everybody, and welcome back to History with Salty B, episode 6. In today's episode, we are going to be going through 3 different books that I've read, all to do with different dynasties in Europe. The first one will be The House of Medici, the book The Medici by Paul Strathern. Then we've got Iron Kingdom by Christopher Clark, which is about the Prussian kingdom and the Prussian monarchy. And then House of Lilies by Justine Fernharber Baker, which is about the Capetian dynasty. Specifically, the whole French monarchy is the House of Lilies. Specifically, the House of Capet before the House of Valois took over the throne. It's all kind of the same house, but that would be from Hugh Capet all the way to Charles IV in France. So I've got my notes here. I've got my family trees all ready to go. I will also have one more segment at the end that I'm not going to tell you about quite yet. But before we get into The Medici by Paul Strathern, let's do a little bit of a haul. Now, I've got the bookshelf here, and I showed you not everything I had last time. It's been 6 weeks, something like that. I have one new thing that's rather large, and then I think there's 2 things that I didn't show you last time. So let's start with the most low-key of them all. This was a $10 banger, and we've got Peter the Great by Robert K. Massey. I think I've finished all these audiobooks that I'm going to talk with you about. I think this might be what I read next, like I actually physically read next, because I've got the Spanish Armada going at my girlfriend's place, and I think I might get into this one. So that is Europe in the time of Peter the Great. I read The Romanovs by Simon Sebag Montefiore, loved it, and I came out of it thinking that Peter the Great may not have been as great as the title might suggest, but I'm willing to, give him another shot, and yeah, I'm very excited about this. It's also got a beautiful map of St. Petersburg there. So yeah, Peter the Great by Robert K. Massey. Just an old book, $10, wasn't anything special. But I'm very excited about the contents of it. Next up, this was a little bit more. This one was $75. In fact, these 3 over here these are my really nice $75 ones. And by William H. Prescott. This is one of the oldest history books, one of the most well-known history books. He also did The Conquest of Peru. This is The Conquest of Mexico. This is the Folio Society version. And just, damn, that's gorgeous. My laptop camera isn't going to do it justice, but amazing. And so excited, because I think The Conquest of Mexico is one of the most interesting parts of history. Just amazing. Comes with a map of the Aztec Empire on one side. That's a map of central Mexico. And then this is a map of the Aztec Empire. So that first one's just this area. Which I love, because so many of these books have the same map on both insides, and I'm like, really? You couldn't have thought of any other map to put on the other side? I don't know. I think it's just pointless to have the same map twice. So very excited about reading that, and I just think it's just a gorgeous book, and it goes so well. This dark green book, it goes so well next to the other $75 ones. I've got the Raj and Eyewitness History, then the Rise and Fall of the British Empire, the Habsburgs right here, all these very striking colors, and that green one. Ooh, those look so good. And then, last but not least, I got this yesterday, and I'm so excited about this. First, I'll show you the outside, and maybe that can give you a hint about what it's about. That is the Ottomans and the Spanish fighting. And this is the Mediterranean and the Mediterranean world by Fernand Braudel. And this is a book series. So the full title, obviously, it has that on the side. Each one looks like that. The full title is The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World in the Age of Philip II. Pretty common for history books to talk about not only a location or whatever, but a time period, and they will usually define that time period by the ruler or the most important ruler. This is not a book about Philip II like the Peter the Great one, but it is a book about the times of Philip II. So they put that in there. Philip II of Spain, if you're confused. So this book basically looks at the entire Mediterranean from Gibraltar all the way to the Bosphorus and Cairo and everything, right? Not Cairo, Alexandria, right? All of the Mediterranean in the second half of the 1500s. If you watch the last episode 5 of History with Salty B, you'll know that I said the 1500s, the 16th century, is my favorite century, just history-wise. It's just so interesting. So much great stuff happens there. And if I had to research one... if I had to buy a huge book collection on... I would take the tag off the bottom there. On one century, it would be the 15th century, or the 16th century, the 1500s. So this is basically a book about the entire Mediterranean in the century that I find so interesting. So I saw this in the bookstore, and I sat on it for a little bit. I waited like a couple weeks, and I thought, I don't know, I could buy this later in life sometime, but I think this is just a great opportunity because there's not too many history books that just are exactly the type of book you want. If I could snap my fingers and have certain history books, I know what topics I might do. But the Mediterranean in the 1500s during the reign of Philip II, that's like exactly a topic I want. And this was, are you ready? $145, which is pretty expensive, but I was looking online and $150 was pretty average. Maybe one day I'll stumble across a set like this, because this is in really good condition. I mean, it's in not pristine condition, but it's in pretty good condition. Maybe I stumble across a copy that is $100 or something, cheaper. Like, it's not out of the question, but I just thought, you know what? I thought about it for a little while, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy it. So I treated myself, $145. Also, I mean, in the last 6 weeks since I last talked to you guys, I haven't bought a single book, right? Like, it has been, it's not like I'm splurged as much. You might have noticed the amount of books on the shelf hasn't increased too much over the last couple episodes because I grew my collection. I now have a great collection, and I'm kind of good. I'm sitting on it for a while. So that's kind of the new addition. And what's it about? It goes through the first volume. You can see which one's first. The first volume is all about the geography of the Mediterranean, which I think is great because the geography doesn't change that much, So yeah, it's about the 1500s, second half of the 1500s. The geography is going to be relatively the same. Then the middle one is more about like the commerce, the economy, the networks inside the Mediterranean. And then the last, the biggest one is, they're all pretty much the same size, but the biggest one, that is about the rulers, the wars, the battles, the empires, right? It was written by Fernand Braudel while he was a prisoner of war during the First World War, and he wrote a ton of it by memory, which is crazy. He just had done so much research, and he wrote a ton of it by memory. And because he wrote it by memory, he couldn't do like little tiny facts. He had to go like big picture with it all, right? The systems. That's what he created. He showed how the Mediterranean is an entire system. It's not just one nation over here, another nation. No, it's one big system. And before this book, history was kind of defined by kings and battles and years. And after this book, history is more defined by geography and the passage of time and all this kind of stuff, much more than just a king and a battle and a war and stuff like that. So this is one of the most important history books of all time. Like when I was doing research on it, I was like, oh, this is like I need to have this. Even if it's a little expensive, I'd rather it was like $100, not 145. I bit the bullet, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm meant to have this, and it looks good on the shelf, doesn't it? So that is the haul. Maybe I should have saved one of those for the next haul because I really don't think I'm gonna get much more. But I could have saved that for the next haul. Fuck, I'm so bad at this. I could have saved this for the next haul, but I was like, nah, I just got it. Like, let me share it. So, on to The Medici by Paul Strathern. I was really interested in learning more about the Medici because they are not a royal family. They do have 2 queens, 2 popes, and became archdukes. Or grand dukes, sorry. Grand dukes? Hold on, I have a family tree here somewhere. Where is it? Yes. They were grand dukes, not archdukes. Archdukes is just the Habsburgs. They made that one up. So let's get into the Medici. And the Medici started as a banking family. Their name, Medici, means like, it kind of means like medic or physician. But there's nothing anywhere that actually says they were physicians. It's just kind of like that's just what their name is. Their coat of arms is 6, I guess you could say 6 like punches, 6 holes, 6 punches in a shield. And that's because like one of their ancestors was supposed to have like held up a shield and fought a giant, and the giant punched it 6 times, and then that became their family crest. But that's also kind of like fictional. The founder of the Medici Bank was Giovanni de' Medici, and he founded it. It was pretty low profile. It wasn't really like the biggest yet. There were still many more big Medici banks. And then a lot of the Medici, or a lot of the Florence banks, so it all takes place in Florence, obviously, a lot of the Florence banks went bankrupt because a ton of them gave money to Edward III of England, and then he couldn't give it back, so they all went bankrupt. So when the Medici kind of came up into power as the number 1 bank in Florence, which was around the late, like early 1400s, so that would have been a generation after Edward III. They were able to step into the shoes of those other families, and they became the number 1 bank. And that really happened with Cosimo de' Medici. So Giovanni founded it, but Cosimo, he was the political ruler of Florence, like unofficially, because he was just the head of the main bank in Florence. They had their own currency called florins, and that's actually the only currency in the world that was named after a city. And this started from the Florence bankers. So Cosimo, ruled from 1434 to 1464. I do have a family tree here that's not on my royal family trees because they aren't a family tree, or they aren't royal. So I'll put that up. I'll put that up while I'm talking. So Cosimo. Then when Cosimo died, his son was Piero de' Medici, known as the Gouty because he had gout, which is so funny. Cosimo was a patria patile or patier, means father of his people, like because he was the main man. He was ruling Florence, again, not as a monarch but kind of unofficially. Then Lorenzo de' Medici, so he's known as Lorenzo the Magnificent. He's probably the most important Medici, the most well-known. This book I actually really enjoyed because it's about the Medici, but it goes through the whole Renaissance. Donatello and Michelangelo and Da Vinci and all the Ninja Turtles. They interweave with the Medici on and off, and there's entire chapters of the story that are dedicated to just themes of the Renaissance, like not even talking about the Medici or talking very little about the Medici. So yeah, Lorenzo, peak of Medici power, and the main thing, and this book actually starts with the Pazzi conspiracy, and this is when they attempted to kill Lorenzo at church one day, and that's like the introduction of this book. And then it kind of goes back, it's good storytelling, goes back and shows you how you got here. And Lorenzo was actually confined for a little while, and then let go, and then he left the city, and then he was gone for a little while, and then he came back. But he ended up on top, and he would have a bunch of kids, and two of his grandchildren, or no, one of his children would become Pope Leo X, who was Pope from 1513 to 1521, and he excommunicated Martin Luther. So it was a Medici who started Protestantism. Oh, God. So it was a Medici who started the Reformation, or I mean, Martin Luther started the Reformation. It was a Medici who was the villain against the Reformation. After Lorenzo, it went to Piero de' Medici, and he was not as good as his dad. He got invaded. This is when Charles VIII of France invaded Florence. I think he was on his way to Rome, I think, but he stopped in Florence and invaded the city. So Piero was only ruler for 2 years, and then from there isn't a Medici ruler for another 4 years while they're out of the city. Then Giovanni de' Medici, so this is Piero's son, Lorenzo's grandson, returns in 1512. So Lorenzo's nephew becomes Pope Clement VII. He's Pope for 11 years, and he is the one who forbids the divorce of Henry VIII. Then we have Pope Leo XI. So yeah, there are 3 popes. I said 2, there's 3. I kind of combined those 2 in my head, I guess. Anyway, his aunt has Cosimo the First. And now this line kind of runs out. You can see Lorenzo, this line runs out and just becomes all women, except for Alejandro here. He is the first Duke of Florence, and then it jumps over to Cosimo the First. Let's talk about Catherine a little bit first before we talk about the Grand Duke. So Catherine was the daughter of Lorenzo II, and she's queen consort of France, and she marries Henry II, right? Yeah. So she marries Henry II, and he was, I believe, a second son. So he was not expected to be king, but he ends up being king. And then, so that means a Medici was mother to 3 kings of France, because this is the end of the line of Valois. And so, yeah, Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III. Their mom is Catherine de' Medici. Catherine de' Medici, she's this larger-than-life figure. She brings the Renaissance to the French court, and really has influence over her sons, especially the youngest ones. Then her daughter marries Henry IV, who's the first king from the House of Bourbon. And then that marriage doesn't work out, and then he marries Maria de' Medici. So it's the Medici are really connected to the French nobles at this point, even though this is 2 different families. And so it's a Medici who is the mother of King Louis XIII, who's of course the father of King Louis XIV. So King Louis XIV, probably one of the top 5 monarchs of all time. He has a Medici grandma. Back to the Grand Dukes, though. Cosimo I, Grand Duke of Tuscany. This is what I learned from this book, is really that as soon as they became Grand Dukes, I mean, the peak of the Medici was definitely at the peak of the Renaissance as well. Lorenzo de' Medici, the Magnificent. But once they become Grand Dukes, it's all down from there, pretty much. I mean, yeah, they still are married. They're more royal now. They're connected to the French royal family, but it's really all downhill from here. And Cosimo is the first Grand Duke, and it's he is very important. Like, he's the first Grand Duke, and he creates a lasting dynasty, but it's not like it doesn't last for an insanely long amount of time from when they become Grand Dukes. It's about 150 years, and he uh, expands the territory of Florence to be. It's not just the city; it is a duchy now, and then from there, it's Francesco the First. He wasn't as into the whole governing thing like Cosimo, and he doesn't even end up fathering a successor. He does have Maria, who becomes the queen consort of France, but it is Fernando, his second son, who carries on the line. Um, and Fernando revives the economy a little bit, revives trade, balances things to strengthen Tuscany. And that's kind of the last good thing. It really starts to suffer. Cosimo II is after that. This is the family tree just goes to Grand Dukes of Tuscany here, but it really just goes Cosimo II, Fernando II, Cosimo III, and Fernando II has a really long reign, 49 years, 1621 to 1670, and he does nothing. And it's this stagnation that really brings an end to Tuscany as a duchy and having its own power with Grand Dukes. Excuse me. It's a really long reign, but it's just a long decline. And then Cosimo III is after that, and he is super conservative and super religious, and he rules for another 23 years, or no, even longer. Sorry, another 53 years. Yeah, he's even longer. So two really long reigns that just aren't, they're just not good rulers. They just don't get anything done, and they're both huge obese guys who just sit around all day. And then by the time Gian Gastoni becomes the final ruler, the final Medici ruler, it's just too late. And it's like the population, it was said at this time that Florence was just a ghost town. Like, it felt like there was like 10% of the houses were filled. It's just people had just left. It was just a ghost town now. So once they became Grand Dukes, they had a couple bad rulers in a row, close to 70 years of just bad Grand Dukes, and things just stagnated and then just started to die. And that was it. And yeah, I really love this book because it's about the Renaissance. Like, you're going to learn a ton about the Renaissance, but it's also about this family that's not royal. They're kind of like, I mean, they got to where they got to on merit. They were a banking family, and they just were the power behind the city, and then they just became the de facto rulers, and then the actual rulers. So yeah, Paul Strathern's Medici, love it, great book. You learn a lot about different parts of history and a lot of interesting characters. Some great stories in there. Highly recommend. So next we've got Christopher Clark's Iron Kingdom, about Prussia. And a major question of this book is, what even is Prussia? Because if you look behind me here, Prussia doesn't even pop up. So this is Prussia here. It comes from the state of the Teutonic Order. Here, I'll flip around for you. And can you even see that? Hold on. I guess I gotta go this way. I'm sorry. So here's Prussia, and it's a duchy for a long time. Here's where it becomes a kingdom. Then it becomes the German Empire, the Weimar Republic, Nazi Germany, and then that's kind of when Prussia ends as a state. Prussia was fully gone from every map in 1947, so a couple years after World War II. And yeah, it keeps getting bigger and bigger. You can see on the side map here, so Prussia's in the black, so it doesn't even appear till right there. It's a little bigger there, and then now it's all of Germany. Um, and yeah, a lot of this book is talking about like what even is Prussia. I mean, it's what we would now today call East Germany and West Poland, I guess. and but like, what really is it? Is a major question of this book, and how it almost like accidentally becomes a great power, and it was very fragmented, and it just kind of kept adding on territories, and then it becomes suddenly it's the biggest German power because Austria is declining. And so then when Germany is trying to unify in the 1860s, Italy was trying to unify at the same time. um, it was kind of the age of unification in Europe, and now Germany's trying to unify. They unify under Prussia because Prussia is kind of the biggest power at the time. And 100 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that would be the case, right? You'd think it would unify over like uh, Bavaria or Hanover or something, right? Like you wouldn't expect Prussia to be the ones. But the Hohenzollerns of Brandenburg, they're the electors of the Holy Roman Empire, one of 7 electors. And the elector of Brandenburg, for generations was a Hohenzollern, but not a monarch by any means. And Prussia wasn't that big either. Then the Great Elector is what they call him, Frederick William. He kind of puts in motion Prussia becoming a monarchy. And I'm just looking at the thing here. So yeah, it is 1701. Frederick the First becomes, well, he becomes Frederick the First. I believe he was like Frederick the Third of Brandenburg or something, and they became Frederick the First, King of Prussia. And why did they become a monarchy in 1701? It is because that is the same year as the Spanish War of Succession. Charles II died without issue, and now France wanted to put Louis XIV's grandson on the throne, and Austria wanted to put, I believe it was Charles the eventual Charles VI, of the Holy Roman Empire. They wanted to put him on the throne because he was the second son of Leopold I. And Austria wanted Prussia's backing in this war. And Prussia said, okay, if you want our backing, then we want to be a monarchy. We want a king. Which was weird because there were no king. I mean, there might have been some kings, but they didn't have the same power as the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor. And yeah, I don't think there were many kings in the same way that like a king of England, like it might have been a king, but they were outranked by other kings. When it comes to like, I mean, Hanover, the kings of Hanover were the kings of England, or at least they're about to become in 1714. But Prussia said, we'll help you in the Spanish War of Succession if we can become a monarchy. And so Leopold I said, okay, I think it was still him at the time. Yep, Leopold I said, okay, you are now Frederick I. And from there, Prussia starts becoming a great power, slowly but surely, and eventually they become a bigger power than Austria, and then they become the German power, and now Germany is way bigger than Austria is, isn't it? So very interesting how that happened. And I did not know that. Like, I did not know that Prussia became a monarchy because Austria needed their help. After Frederick I, because he set the foundation, and he was the only the only Prussian monarch to have a coronation. I'm pretty sure he had the biggest, most lavish coronation because it was the first one Prussia had ever had, and then that was it. It never happened again. His son Frederick William I was the soldier king. He was a hard ass. He in this book it kind of talks about how Prussian kings flip-flop between the most pomp and just flourishes and gold and fanciness to soldier wearing a uniform and nothing else, clean cut, right? Like they kind of go back and forth between this. They almost flip-flop between these two types of kings, which is really funny. And Frederick William I was, by the way, they are all Fredericks or Frederick Williams, so get used to it. Frederick William is Frederick William the First. He's the first to be like this. He rules from 1713 to 1740, and yeah, he builds this massive army, one of the first standing armies in Europe, like to just always have a standing army. He creates this force of extremely tall soldiers, and I'm talking tall to the point where they can barely walk, like just the tallest people in Prussia. He like takes from their homes and says, "You are joining my tall person unit." And then they're so tall that they can barely even like march and stuff because they're just like they're deformed, but that doesn't matter, right? And then there's a lot of backlash against him, like this forced conscription in the army. He also hates his son Frederick, who just has a lot of he pushes back against his dad, and he even runs away at one point, and Frederick William considers executing him. This is Frederick II, otherwise known as Frederick the Great. He is by far the greatest Prussian king. And in his youth, he was very into like poetry and stuff like that, and his father hated that, and like threatened to kill him, like threatened to execute him. He expands once he's king. He is also a soldier king. I mean, he's Frederick the Great. He takes over stuff. He expands Prussia, but he wasn't as much like his dad. And he expands Prussia through Silesia, which is kind of modern day like Czech Republic. And then there's a big enlightenment in Prussia at this time, where there's kind of this connection and fostered identity all surrounding Frederick the Great. And I'm really excited to read, where is it? The 7 Years' War, because that is a lot about Frederick the Great. And this book I have, it's more of a focus on the English during the Seven Year War, but Frederick the Great was their ally during that. It was basically England and Prussia against everybody else. So yeah, I'm excited to read something else on Frederick the Great, because I'll be honest, when I was listening to this book, it wasn't drawing me in as much as other things, and I was kind of losing interest a little bit. And then it got to the 7 Year War, and I just got hooked right back in. Like the part about the 7 Year War is just amazing in this book. I really enjoyed it. After him. So he rules from 1740 to 1786. So all really long reigns so far, pretty much, other than Frederick I, who he was only king for the last part of his reign. Then it is Frederick William II, who is the nephew of Frederick the Great, because he didn't have any kid. Maybe I'm making that up. I think he didn't have any kids. Frederick the Great. I think he married, and they never had any kids, and he was gay, I think. I'm pretty sure. So Frederick William II, he inherits the state as the nephew of Frederick the Great, and this is kind of when you got growing corruption. It's the leadership's much weaker at this point, obviously, and this is where the Enlightenment, almost like now that Frederick the Great, this kind of figure that the Enlightenment in Prussia kind of revolved around, now he's gone, it almost made the Enlightenment expand even more. And there's a lot of upheaval at this time. This is also during the French Revolutionary period, so every nation in Europe is hesitant about their own monarchies collapsing, having more revolution. So there's a lot of talk about revolution during this time. And Frederick William III, who is the son of Frederick William II, he inherits this, and he is the ruler in from 1797 to 1840. So it is he who deals with Napoleon. He actually helps with the defeat of Napoleon in 1806. And he kind of third wheels. There's a lot of talk of when Napoleon and Tsar Nicholas II, Tsar Alexander the First. Nicholas II was the last one. Tsar Alexander the First, when they meet on their boat halfway between, on the river, and they're meeting on the border of Russia and Prussia. Frederick William III is like left to wait in a waiting room during that. Like, he is completely third wheeled. And during this time, Napoleon is going back and forth between France and Russia, and he's just going through Prussia. Like, he's I don't know. French troops are just walking through Prussia, and there's a lot of anti-French stuff during this time in Prussia, and it's almost like during his reign, Frederick William III was really like Napoleon's bitch, and kind of got walked all over. And this leads to the wars of liberation against the French, and kind of pushing out Napoleon and everything. And there's major reforms during this time, obviously, because of all this French stuff, and schools, military education, it's all reformed. After him, it is his son, Frederick William IV, ruled 1840 to 1861. And he was definitely, I think he's probably the weakest. He was made fun of a lot. Like, political cartoons were really ramping up in this time, in the 1800s, and there's tons of political cartoons about Frederick William IV just being bad. And he was kind of like a bit of a romantic conservative, and it just didn't really work out for him, and people didn't really like him that much. He was trying to cling to traditional authority, didn't really want the constitutional monarchy and stuff, but everywhere in Europe was kind of turning towards a constitutional monarchy at this point. Not everywhere, but a lot of them. And so after him, it then goes to William Wilhelm the First, who was the first German emperor. So this is his brother, and he was the first German emperor, Otto von Bismarck's man, and this is when Germany unified. So Prussia was really just like northern Germany, what we know as northern Germany today. That would be kind of what Prussia was at this point, and then they unified Germany and kind of just became all of Germany, and now it's the German Empire, unified Germany. Prussia is still obviously a thing, and so is Hanover, and so is Bavaria and Württemberg and everything, but Prussia was now the leader of all of it. And Wilhelm I ruled from 1861 to 1888. 1871, so 10 years into his reign, that is when he became emperor. After him, it is his son, who only ruled for 99 days. He had cancer, and he was like on his deathbed when his dad died, and then so he ruled. Frederick III. He ruled the entire time, from his sickbed, and then died. He actually debated whether he should be named Frederick III, as in the next after Frederick II, or should he be Frederick IV, because there were 3 Fredericks of the Holy Roman Empire, and now Prussia is the new German Empire. So should he be Frederick IV, because he's the continuation of the Holy Roman Empire? This is also why Nazi Germany is called the Third Reich. Reich, there isn't really a perfect translation of it, but Reich roughly means realm, or like kingdom, realm, right? So they are the third realm. The first realm being the Holy Roman Empire, which lasted all the way into the 1800s. The second realm being the German Empire, which lasted until the end of World War I. We're about to see the end of it. And then the third realm being the Nazis, the Third Reich. So Frederick deciding whether he was Frederick III or Frederick IV, that was basically deciding whether they were a continuation of the Holy Roman Empire, or he's just the Prussian king still, right? But he did end up going Frederick III, so not saying that they are the continuation of the Holy Roman Empire, especially because Austria was still around, right? Austria was still an empire, so they weren't the Holy Roman Empire anymore. They were just the Austrian Empire, but they probably wouldn't have liked it if he took the name Frederick IV. He was only around for 99 days, though. Then Wilhelm II came into power. He was in power from 1888 to 1988. He would live all the way into the the 50s or something. He lived for a while longer, but at the end of World War One, he was forced to abdicate. He was a real people's monarch. He was the first monarch in history to like really get into the press. He would do speeches everywhere he went, right? A king's speech isn't that common, really. Sometimes they would even just have like the prime minister or someone else do a speech, but Wilhelm II like legitimately loved the spotlight and would do tons of speeches and all this kind of stuff, and newspaper stuff, and like was always talking to his subjects. And the monarchy became abolished after 1918, and that'd be the end of Prussia. And as a monarchy, Prussia itself would still exist for a while. And then when the Nazis were in power, they would use a lot of Prussian propaganda, a lot of Prussian sentiments, and kind of the idea of Prussia as this military force that's now the Nazis. They would use a lot of this. They even did during Hitler's I'm not coronation, but when he became chancellor, they did it in the Prussian like mausoleum or whatever it's called, not the mausoleum, but like where Prussian kings would become crowned. They did it there. Like they were trying to make this romantic connection between the Prussia of old and the Nazis. And yeah, that is the Prussian monarchy. And I was really interested to learn more about this because Christopher Clark goes into great detail about Prussia, and I really learned a lot about just what Prussia is and what they found important, because it's very easy to just go, oh, Prussia was this highly militarized German state, kind of like the Nazis, right? Like, but then you learn more about it, and you see it from the eyes of the people a little bit, and what they went through, and their rulers, and how the people were shaped by who their ruler was at what time. And also just the fact that, yeah, they kind of accidentally became the great power. I mean, during the 7 Years' War, they were a top 4, top 3 power on the planet, you know, and that happened just because Leopold I needed some help trying to get his son on the throne of Spain. And it didn't happen, but he made Prussia a kingdom, and then they ended up being the strongest German power and not Austria, and they became the German Empire, and that leads into the Nazis, and yeah. So, I mean, a ton of what the Nazis were trying to do was to try to gain back what the Prussians had, right? So, yeah. Anyway, on to the last book, and I'm going to cut the final. We're not going to do it. This is going to be the final segment. I'm sorry. My voice is going, and this is going to be the final segment. So last is House of Lilies by Justine Fernhaber Baker. I really enjoyed this. This is another book that was read by the author, and she does a great job. And I really like it when the author is reading an audiobook, because it just, I don't know, it puts me in a, like, this is the person who wrote this. It's not just someone reading it off a script. Like, no, they know their own words, and it's really cool. So this goes from 1987. Whoa, no, it doesn't. 987. Sorry, my modern brain has a hard time saying years that only have 3 digits. It goes from 987 all the way to 1328. And that was the original Capetian kings. Now, the House of Capet, which is basically the house that ruled France all the way up to Napoleon, even though they were called the Valois for a little while, but it was still male line descendants. It was actually just male line descendants of a second son of an uncle of the previous king. And then the Bourbons were also descendants. Everyone was a descendant of Saint Louis, Louis IX. But these Capetian kings, they weren't actually called the Capetians. They were not called the Capetians until the French Revolution, when they needed a last name for Louis XVI, because they were executing Louis XVI as a citizen. They're saying private citizen Louis, what's his last name? Louis would shrug, I don't have a last name. I'm fucking Louis Royale. I'm Louis the 16th. I don't have a last name. But if they were to execute him as a private citizen, they needed him to have a last name. So they gave him the last name Capet. Not even Bourbon, which is now what we know him as Bourbon. No, they gave him the last name Capet because it was Hugh Capet who started the dynasty in 987. So very interesting that, yeah, the term Capetians, the Capetian kings, the House of Capet, that did not exist until they were executing the last king of France. Didn't end up being the last king of France, but they thought he was going to be. Hugh Capet starts the dynasty, and it was it wasn't quite legitimate. He kind of was a bit of an usurper, Hugh Capet. Like, there definitely were other people that could have been king. There was 3 kings in a row from another dynasty, and then it went to him. And yeah, they were, a lot of people were saying, oh, Hugh Capet isn't even related to Charlemagne, stuff like that. Then it goes 11 consecutive father-son successions. Robert II, Henry I, Philip I, Louis VI, Louis VII, Philip II, Louis VIII, Louis IX, Philip III, Philip IV, Louis X, John I. John I is the baby that died after 5 days. So that is where it ended. And then there were 2 more, the brothers of Louis X, Philip V and Charles IV. And then it then jumped to back 1 generation and went to the House of Valois, which is still just the Capetians. But yeah, going through all of this history, this was one of the most satisfying books to read. I mean, like 13 generations of kings over the course of 400 years, and going through all of it. I'm not really going to go each monarch one by one, but it kind of went through eras of, like, how do I describe it? Like, it went through an era where Paris was now the new Rome, kind of in the early days, and then it went through an era where Paris was the new Jerusalem. Like, that's around the time of Louis IX, who was a crusader. In fact, I believe Louis VII, Philip II, Louis VIII, Louis IX, and maybe in Philip III, I think 5 in a row, kings were all crusaders, which is really interesting. And then they even took over Naples for a little while. A son of Louis VIII became the king of Naples. So yeah, I don't have too much more to say on this book. I highly recommend it. Like, if you want to read a rather short book. I feel like the audiobook was only like 10 hours or something, 12 hours. I got through it, I think, in 2 days, and it was a really satisfying read. Like, it's the kind of book that I love books like this, where it's about a dynasty, and it just goes very quickly through each reign, and kind of what happened, all the little interesting facts about it, and how things changed, and the Crusades, especially the First Crusade, the Second Crusade, the failure of the Second Crusade by Louis VII. Philip II was known as Philip Augustus, because he was kind of like this new Augustus figure. He defeated King John of England. And then Louis IX. Louis IX led a crusade in Egypt, which is crazy, and he led a crusade in Egypt because he thought if they would win in Egypt and then they can go on to Jerusalem. That didn't work. So then for his second trip, he went to Tunis, which is like modern day Tunisia, and then was going to go to Egypt and then Jerusalem, and then they fell in Tunis as well. I don't know. Louis IX, to me, seems like he failed a lot, but they love him. He's a saint. And then the end of the book kind of gets to the accursed kings, Philip IV and his sons, who I've talked about a lot already on this channel. In episode 3, I think it was, where I talk about the Accursed Kings series, and that is what this is about. So this book gave me the context for the end of the House of Capet with the Accursed Kings series, and this kind of gave me the context of those last 9 father-son successions. One last thing I'll leave you with. I talked about how Maurice Druon, the author of The Accursed Kings, I said that he made up this thing about there being a baby swap and then this other baby ends up being this guy in Italy who then is told, like, hey, you're the real king of France and you're John the First, the posthumous. And he's like, what? And then he goes around getting all these people to follow him, and then he ends up getting thrown into a jail in Naples and dies there. And it's really sad because he had this whole like normal life with kids and everything, upstanding citizen, and then he gets these dreams of a throne and then leaves all that, and then he dies in prison. That was real. That actually happened. That did happen. That was not made up. Maurice Durand, he might have embellished some things, but no, like that was real. There was a guy who claimed to be the posthumous John the First and said he got told by the Pope that he was the guy, and that the babies got switched at birth, and it was this wet nurse's son that actually died, and so that was real. That was real. That was in this book, and when I found out that actually happened, I was like, what? Like I thought that was just drama. So yeah. Anyway, Justine Fernharber Baker, really loved this book, and I'd love to read something else from her. Maybe I'd love to go into the Valois. Like I'd love to learn more about the Valois. If she wrote something like that. So, anyway, I think that's gonna be it. My voice, I'm kind of losing my voice. I was gonna talk about a period in history that I find interesting. I was gonna talk about the Regency era, but I think we'll save it for next week or next whenever for episode 7. Thanks for watching this episode of History with Salty B, episode 6. I highly recommend the Medici if you want to learn about the Renaissance a little bit. It's a lot about art and stuff like that. If you are traveling to Florence, I highly recommend you read a book about the Medici, because it will just. I wish I'd read something about the Medici when I went to Florence. I did take a tour through their palace where the Grand Dukes live, so I did do that. That was fun. And I went to the burial. Like I saw where a lot of these like Cosimo, and I saw where a lot of them are buried. But I didn't have the context behind it, so I really wish I'd learned about the Medici. I don't really recommend the Prussia book unless that's something you're interested in. It's fine. It's a little bit boring, and it helped me learn more about Prussia because I wanted to, but I don't think I wouldn't recommend it. I do highly recommend The House of Lilies by Justine, because yeah, banger, really great book, not too long, tons of history, tons of good stuff in there, and so many kings, and yeah, really good. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in episode 7. Okay, what's up? Goodbye.